All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for a few real people out there just like you and just like me. So today is the anniversary of 9/11. It's 9/11 of the year 2023. And I think a lot of people have lost perspective and they're looking back, and everybody is reminiscing about where they were and what they were doing at the time, what rock musicians were up to, what albums were coming out on that day, what sales clerks were thinking. I mean, just some weird articles I've read this morning, and none of which really capture the horror and the injustice and the insanity of that moment when those planes went in. And I think people like to focus on what they were doing that day. And that's an important part of this, but it's really about what happened on that day and how the world changed forever. Alan Jackson writes in his song, "Where were you when the world stopped turning?" I think that was the best song of all of the songs that came out of 9/11 and that tragedy. The rock musicians are kind of, sort of tinkering around the edges, being a little more subtle, talking about the rising. People talk about how Bob Dylan put out an album that was somewhat predictive of what was going to happen. Of course, you'll get all the conspiracy theorists out there saying, see, the government knew it was predictive programming. They had Dylan write those lyrics ahead of time. No, I'm sure Dylan had another issue in mind when he wrote the lyrics, or maybe he didn't have an issue in mind. He's Bob Dylan. He can write whatever he wants to. And this idea that somehow the music world made the situation better because they had benefit concerts and the country at that moment had changed and people were getting along. It was so temporary. People were going back to church, for instance, and that was okay for a couple of years. Yeah, I need to go to church. I need to get back to what's truly important. And then, of course, it went away. And not only did it go away, but it seems as though things have gotten so out of whack that people who do go to church are a real minority now in this country and are looked at like they're freaks. Like, hey, let's just get with the program here. There's nothing greater than you as a person. In fact, most of the theology in churches today is a you-centric, you-focused. It's about you. It's not about God. It's all about how you're feeling, how you're doing, if you can live your best life now. And the unselfishness of the heroes of that day. Think of what happened when firefighters went into a building that was on fire and about to collapse, looking for people to rescue. That's the kind of heroism that I don't think anybody in the music world understands. And no offense to them, and maybe even me, it's like when you start to sing about things that you have really no business singing about because you don't bring any sort of knowledge or understanding to what is happening. You're just putting it out there because you feel a certain way. And we're all concerned about our feelings. We're not concerned about what actually happened on that day. And what happened on that day was we did something as a country to provoke evil in a different part of the world to basically ruin our way of life. And they did. I mean, go to an airport sometime. Do you like the security? Do you enjoy the TSA? Do you like the cavity searches? Aren't they just great? Well, again, you can thank what happened on 9/11 for that, and then some crazy politicians who came along later and said, we need the Patriot Act. But you don't hear or see much pushback from the rock music world, from the music industry in general. Oh, yeah, we need to be safe, just like during everything is about our safety. Nothing is about our freedom. Whether it's a pandemic or a 9/11 style attack, It's all about reducing our ability to be individuals and lead productive lives apart from what the government is telling us to do. It was, again, never let a good crisis go to waste. And by the way, all of these great musicians who had benefit concerts, whether it was John Bon Jovi or Bruce Springsteen or Neil Young or whoever back in those days, right? It's the party who is in power right now who said we should defund the police. And the police and the fire department were very brave during 9/11. These are the best people. These are the people who are doing things that you and I don't have the courage to do. Yet they're constantly being maligned by a certain political party in this country who looks down upon them or wants to defund them. Think about that. Imagine if they had said prior to 9/11 that we ought to defund the police in New York City. If you remember, the mayor at the time, Mayor Giuliani, he had changed that city for the better. He had cleaned it up and he had made it as safe, I think, as it's ever been. And whether you like Giuliani or not today, that doesn't matter. He did something that was really very impossible, or at least many people thought it couldn't be done. But he managed to do it. So he had some of the best and the bravest people. He had good morale at the time, whereas now these police departments around the country think that they are, not appreciated, and people aren't supporting them for the most part, because you hear politicians say, hey, I don't support the police. Look, my more libertarian side says, trust but verify. Not every cop is a good cop. But for the most part, the institution is a good idea because you want to keep people safe, right? And so, again, whether it's Bruce Springsteen or Stevie Nicks or John Bon Jovi, they're all on the wrong team when it comes to this issue. They don't talk about it. See, when a tragedy strikes, everybody wants to get in on it. This is called grifting, okay? Yeah, I feel Stevie Nicks wrote a poem, I'm sure, about what happened, or chimed in and told the world how sorry and sad she was about all this stuff. But she lived a life apart from the law enforcement community. She has no idea. None of these people, unless, of course, they have their own private security team, they don't really understand how this works. That's why I think the country music world, who's always been, for the most part, up until just the last few years, a fairly reliable pro-America, pro-law enforcement, pro-normal group of people. The country music world doesn't look ridiculous saying, you know what, I support the police. I support safety. I support, safe streets, that kind of a thing. Today, it's just so backward from where it once was. And again, I don't trust every individual, but some institutions are important to keep the country safe. And on 9/11, 21 years later, or 22 years later, sorry, my math is bad. The rock music world is MIA. Why not do a benefit concert, a tribute concert, or some kind of a concert that would raise funds for all of the widows, right? 20 years later, all of the people that came down with all kinds of illnesses because they were breathing all of those toxic materials, the dust, the ash, the fumes, day after day, as they were looking through the rubble trying to find survivors and then cleaning up that mess. New York City, they got what? The Freedom Tower now. To me, that's all anticlimactic, because those two towers represented a power structure in the country, and it was knocked down, and it's not the same. And like I said, go to an airport these days and you'll wait and wait because of the TSA. And, you can't bring your little shampoo bottle on there. Can't carry that on. Can't do whatever because, could have explosives in there or something. things have changed a lot, and people want security. They want safety. They don't want freedom. And you can call a concert a freedom concert, but it's really not. It's basically a concert raising awareness about all of the things we've given up on. We don't do freedom the way we used to. And I think people have traded away their freedom for all of this safety and security because, number one, they don't want to worry about it. I understand that. Number two, they're not going to protect themselves. They want someone else to do it. But yet, in the same token, it seems as though they're not willing to celebrate the institutions that do all the protecting, that do make the streets safer. It's bizarre. And I think it's very hypocritical for people to come along and say, yeah, I support the police, but I vote for these lunatics. And these lunatics basically say, well, if we're going to cut something out of the budget, we don't need the police. Now, the cries for this have become less and less in the last couple of years, but the fact that they got to the place where people were saying, let's defund the police, and every rock musician, for the most part, is on the blue team. And that's what the blue team wants to do. And so, again, it's really hypocritical in the scheme of things to talk about how rock musicians dealt with what happened after 9/11. It's just a tragedy. Back in 2001, I will say this, the country was more unified, was less politically upside down and crazy. I mean, you had some lunacy, but compared to now, it was a much more unified country. And I think at that moment, people did say, let's just put aside some of the stupidity and try to work together to make the country a better place. And of course, then you got the Patriot Act, which made the country a horrible place. And that was actually somebody who was on the red team, doing that stuff because they don't want to be outdone by the blue team. And it's just really sad. And that's why when you go to an airport, you can thank what happened on 9/11, and then you can thank our response to that. As far as the rock music world goes, if they really want to put their proverbial money where their mouth is, I know it's 22 years later, and maybe it's too little too late, but they should have had benefit concerts on the 10th anniversary, the 15th anniversary, the 20th anniversary, raising money and awareness for these people, and also talking about how we love the police and we love the fire department. We love all these people who did courageous things, people that none of these rock musicians would be willing to do. I mean, I can guarantee it. I mean, maybe if it was one of their own, as far as their family, they might take a risk and do something out there. But these people did it on behalf of total strangers, people they never met before. And many of them lost their lives when that tower collapsed. And we could ask a few questions on why this happened. Not about conspiracy theories, but why did it get to the point where somebody would want to knock those towers down? What did we do as a country? And nobody asked that question. Everybody just said they hate us because of our freedom. And it's more complicated, way more complicated than that. And all these years later, people are still asking the wrong questions. So anyway, on this 9/11 anniversary, don't worry about what the rock music world thinks about this, because they're basically grifting most of the time when it comes to patriotic things. I think the country itself grieved and mourned appropriately without Bruce Springsteen or John Bon Jovi or anybody trying to kind of hone in there and pretend that they're all one of you when they never have been. What they do, though, is they use regular people to help, line their own pockets. And they pretend to be for the working class and all of this stuff. And it's a joke. It's a joke. All of these people attending the concerts, most of them have disposable income that you and I will never see in our lifetime. So I don't understand how that works. I don't understand how they're the ones that are, for the blue collar worker, for the guy who's got, the six pack coming home on a Friday and killed himself all week long so he could make a decent wage and take care of his family. The gap between them and us is growing each and every day. And I, for one, am tired of the grifting. I'm tired of hearing about how they're for me when in reality, they're for the elite. They're for people that I don't relate to, that I wouldn't be friends with, and who don't understand me. So again, that's my little video about 9/11. Why not do a concert in honor of all of the widows, all the people who have been struggling for over 20 years after they lost a husband or a wife or whoever in one of the worst things in the history of humanity. To see those towers come down, just something that is surreal, and a Hollywood movie probably wouldn't be able to write a script like that. I'm sure they wrote scripts prior. That was all predictive programming and they knew it was going to happen. And yeah, that might be true to some degree. Not that they knew it was going to happen, but maybe, there's an element of truth to their thinking in the sense that they know it's so bad and they know we're such an empire. And this is what people don't want to wrap their brains around, that at some point, somebody in some part of the world is going to lose their mind because we've got a military base, 50 yards from, their capital city or something. Anyway, I could ramble on about this, but I shouldn't. Best song to go listen to today would be Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning by the great Alan Jackson, who was on top of the world musically at that time and really expressed himself bluntly, almost too bluntly, right off the cuff. And the song to me stands alone in its honesty and its impact. So see you soon.